Welcome to the Your Gifts Matter podcast. This podcast is all about guiding, educating, and inspiring individuals around the world to access their true gifts, talents, and abilities. We believe that everybody has a gift to offer to the world, and sometimes you may need help, inspiration, and motivation to bring it to life. And that's what this podcast is all about. Our guests are here to share their story, their journey on how they brought their own gifts to the world and show you how you can do the same for yourself. Welcome, everyone. Happy to bring you another episode of Your Gifts Matter, and really excited to have Trevor Turnbull here to share his story with you. Really appreciate you being here, Trevor.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, Aaron. I appreciate the friendship that you and I have built in this short period of time. We haven't known each other that long, but we definitely have aligned visions. And anytime I can come on and chat about the journey, the messiness of it, and it can serve somebody else, then I'm all for it. So
Definitely. Yeah, no, it's been great to connect. I know, yeah, it has been a short period of time, and it actually perhaps speaks to, our own ability to build that trust and connection with other men. But maybe we can even talk about that perhaps as we go through your story. But just, yeah, being able to do that maybe a bit more quickly than maybe we would have done in the past based on our experiences. So yeah, it's been great to connect. But I thought we could start off, Trevor. Just I'd like to have people just kind of share their journey as far back as you want to go, like where kind of things started from you, and what kind of struggles you ran into along the way, maybe as a kid or teenager, what have you.
how much time we got, Aaron?
Yeah. Well, 30, 40 minutes.
30, 40 minutes. All right.
Yeah.
I'll keep it brief but
Yeah.
impactful. So, nowadays what I do for a living is really in addition to co-creating a space called Extremely Conscious with my old neighbor and my good buddy Mike Prince, which of course is how we know each other. I also work with coaches, consultants, founders of companies, people that want to bring their ideas to life, to really attract and invite aligned clients and investors into their offers so that they can create impact, so that they can change their lives and the lives of the people that they work with. So, how do you even get to that place? It's funny because, I'm going home for Christmas here, and every time I go home and see my family, they always kind of look at me and go, "What do you do exactly?" And like, how did you even get involved in this? So I'll kind of step it back to I would guess, 90s, mid 90s type thing
Yeah.
that led me into university. So I was defined as a hockey player back in the day. And in fact, just took my son to his first WHL game last night, which was really fun and
Nice.
brought up a lot of memories. But, when I got done the hockey career, I went and got a marketing degree. And I thought that was the path. It was kind of just a default. Everybody else was doing it that I was friends with. They were in some form of business. And when I got out of that university, I went straight into sales. So I learned from an old school sales guy who basically threw a Yellow Pages book on my desk, which that dates me already, and said, "Here you go, kid. Best of luck, right? Go hit the phones, go start driving around, find phone numbers." And I did that, and I did it successfully. I was lucky to have some great mentorship then, but it wasn't easy. There was a lot of no's along the way. And that was around the mid 2000s, like 2003 to 2005. And then I had a buddy who started telling me about this internet thing. And at the time, I was barely using my email. I think I had had a cell phone for like 2 years. So I was still a bit skeptical. I was like, how is this going to really be the future? And the more I started reading and, picking up the 4 Hour Work Week book and the E-Myth and all that, I thought there's something to this. And I just dove headfirst into it. And that was my first entrepreneurial venture, was a website development company in 2005, 2006, which went through the school of hard knocks on that one because there wasn't a lot of mentorship for online businesses at that time. So you just kind of learn as you go. And, to fast forward it, I ended up selling that business, going back to a job around 2008, working for an agency, like a digital interactive agency. Got involved in the sports industry a bit at that time. And then I really fell in love with that and wanting to kind of pursue a career or create a life in the sports world. And then social media, of course, was coming into our existence, right? So the Twitters, LinkedIn's, Facebook, that type of thing. And I latched onto it. I basically built a brand around it. I called it Sport Fan Connect. And I used it as an opportunity to just like tour around the United States and leverage some contacts in professional sports. And build a platform to educate people on what was happening in sports and social media and sponsorship. And that led me to meeting Lewis Howes along the way, which Lewis and I,
Nice.
yeah, we were kind of running in similar circles at the time in that sports social media space. And we both had the same idea to create a course on LinkedIn because we were leveraging it ourselves. And it was just such an incredible tool at the time. And long story short on that, Lewis had the exact same idea as me. Before we even met, he had brainstormed creating a course and calling it Linked Influence. And so did I. And I actually registered the domain. So I owned it. And he approached me and asked me to buy it. And I said, well, I don't really want to sell it. I'm going to create a
Yeah.
course. But I could see what he was doing and I wanted to work together with him. So I ended up giving him the domain in exchange for taking over a platform called Sports Networker that's he had already built and built a good established base on. And I did that for like 4 years. And then I ended up coming back in and taking over Linked Influence. And we ended up selling like, I think like 19,000 memberships to that online course, which then evolved into a program I called 30-Day Sales Machine because it just evolved past LinkedIn. You know, LinkedIn was a great tool, but it was only a piece of the puzzle. And then I built another program called the Expert Selling Machine, which was more of a mentorship based program, which there's a lot of things we can go into depth on that because that was a huge transition point for me to go from teaching people things to actually mentoring and really impacting people's lives. And it was a huge disruption in my life, but so grateful that I did it because I built an agency on the back of it as well. And then I ended up flipping that, selling that for, a 7-figure deal and
Mm.
working in that company for a couple of years before I finally hit burnout. And this
Mm.
was partially to do with it. What we're doing right now, Zoom calls. You know, nowadays I'm barely on Zoom calls, but at that time it was like 6 to 8 hour days, just
Right.
stop talking to people. It was exhausting. And my habits slipped. I became just kind of average in all aspects of my life as a partner, as a dad, as a provider. And I hit a wall and I had to just flip the switch and essentially burn it all down and start over. And that was when Mike Prince and I met. That's when Extremely Conscious
Yeah.
started. And I'll stop there, man, because there's a
All
lot
right.
more
There's a
pieces.
lot there.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack.
So that burnout moment there, had you ever run into that before? Like in your hockey career or leading up to that? Like, was that familiar? Had you gone all out and kind of hit that wall previously?
You know, looking back on it, I think I did, but yeah, it's interesting you say that because I think the bravery that I had to just stop at that time, because I remember when it was October 2021. There was a
Yeah.
lot of stuff going on in the world at that time, and of course the burnouts and I was a few too many drinks in the evening, not really moving my body, all that kind of stuff, and in the past, I think I had been through experiences like that before, but I didn't have the bravery to just go, I need to stop. I need to slow down. I'm looking for answers. I don't even know what questions to ask. Like, who can I surround myself with? It was really frustrating.
Yeah.
But but yeah, I had been there before. Every time I transitioned my business into some new model, or every time I took the leap from a job to owning a company, or even coming out of university, I guess you could even say too, like I bucked the trend where most people were heading off and working for agencies because that was what you did with your marketing degree. I went into sales. Like nobody else I knew did that. So I guess there is a bit of a history there of almost taking the path less taken. It's a
Yeah. And so where did
default.
that come from? Where did that, because I hear in your story this drive in you, like you went from athlete right into a completely other type of career path with marketing and sales, which takes a lot of confidence and a lot of tenacity to be in that marketplace. So where did all that come from? Like how did you build that drive within you?
Yeah. Well, I've done enough of the deep dive inner work and counseling and working with a spiritual coach to know that it's all probably rooted back to childhood. And if I
Are you
was, what's that?
are you open to sharing anything that came from then?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Because if I was to reflect on that, I think it's just I've had a lifetime of disruption. I've had a lifetime of quote unquote not normal. In the sense of, growing up in a house where the parents stayed together. My parents were divorced when I was young, like
Mm.
2 or 3 years old. I remember moving lots. Even though we were in the same city, we moved houses like 8, 9 times over my first 8 years of my life type thing. I remember going to a small town and, because I did have some talents on the hockey side of things, you move on really fast. Like I was
Right.
at the house by the time I was 15, which was very well supported still. It's not like you got to go find an apartment. Like they put you up with billets and that type of thing. But such a different experience than most people that I was friends with at that time, right? Because you're kind of thrown into the unknown and expected to just figure it out. And yeah, it's been a lifetime of transition and just evolution and disruption and uncomfortableness. And it's only been within the last 2 years that I've got comfortable enough to be in that uncomfortable space and to know that that's actually the space that I seek, because I know how much transformation is available to me in that. And at the same time, I'll say every time I go through it, it sucks, man. You're just like,
Yeah.
come on, can't it just be easier? And then, of course, I know the answer is like, no, no, no. I'm here to play a big game in this life. I don't want to just exist or have it be good enough. I want great. So if I want great, I have to expect that I'm going to be challenged with things that will push me to change my beliefs and change how I show up every single day.
Yeah. And so that, like that, having to move and to and it sounds like you had to grow up pretty quickly. Like you're now being billeted off and having to step into living away from your home in that as a teen. What were you believe like what beliefs were showing up for you there? Were you completely believing that you could do it, or was there chatter going on in your head that like,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's an interesting one. You just brought up a thought for me on that, which is, I mentioned I just took my son to his first hockey game yesterday. He's 7 years old.
yeah,
I've had him skating twice so far. When I look back to my childhood, I was skating at 3.5, 4 years old. I was
right,
walking to the outdoor rink by myself when I was 5. I
mm,
haven't put my kids in hockey. Now, we've been away for a couple of years, so there's been less opportunities because we lived in Costa Rica and Mexico the last couple of years. But I've recognized that I've kept my kids away from hockey for one core reason, and this is getting to your question,
right,
is that time throughout my life, I felt like a lot of people were in control of my destiny.
mm,
The coaches, most notably the coaches, right? Like from basically the age of 7 all the way up until like 25, I felt like my life was dictated based on how other people saw me and what opportunities they would give me. And there's no doubt that that fueled my desire to, like, almost in a negative way, right? To say, I'll show you, right? Just watch. I'm going to go do all this on my own. And that created a stubbornness that really hurt me, I think, in the first, I'd say, 10 years of entrepreneurship, because I refused to accept help. I always thought that there was some ulterior motive, or that somebody was trying to influence me in a certain way. And at the same time, I didn't trust myself to make my own decisions. So I was caught in this weird space of not knowing what to do. And then therefore almost being paralyzed by it. And at the same time, still moving, but just, looking back at those times, there was just so much going on. And yeah, I appreciate you asking that question, because it gives me another depth of understanding of like, why am I wired the way that I am? And
right,
can I trust others
yeah,
to build the life that I want to, right? To actually be involved in that with me? Or am I going to be this loner that doesn't trust anybody forever?
yeah. It makes sense. If you had that feeling of playing hockey that you weren't in control of your destiny, that once leaving it, that you definitely want. It sounds like you just wanted to step into. I'm going to take control of this, and I'm going to make sure that I'm going to do what I want to do. Uh,
Yeah.
and and then I know you talked about that burnout stage. Is that where you realize, okay, I need to get help, or was there moments along the way when you were running your businesses that you realized, okay, I need to get help at some point, like something kind of real made you realize that I can't do this myself.
Yeah, the most notable thought was not during the burnout time, although I could look back at 2018 and say there was somewhat of a burnout there, but it
Yeah.
was masked with doing, right? There was so much going on. Like I was moving so fast. I was innovating, I was creating things, creating programs, just moving, lots of doing. And at that time, I had been successful at creating training for people and monetizing it, and had a good living. I was making good money doing it, and there was just a gut feeling that I was on the wrong path at that time. And it really came down to the results that people were getting from that training, because I knew the training was good. I knew that if people went through it, they'd get the results they were looking for. But, I don't know what the statistics are, but it's less than 10% of people actually follow through and do the thing that you're teaching them to do.
Right.
And that was really deflating. It's like, man, why is nobody doing this? Like, I'm getting the same stupid questions over and over again. I'm answering the questions and nobody's doing it still. So I knew I had to kind of flip my model on its head. And at that time, I didn't really know where to start. I knew that I wanted to go more down the coaching and mentorship route with some training supported or provided in it. And it was at a time when we already had our first son, and our second son was about to be born. I didn't realize it at the time, but
Mm.
in February 2018, I went to a mastermind with the intention of going and hiring the guy that was hosting it. And I had taken out $100,000 loan to do it. So I was going into debt to do it. And I walked away from there and I said, yep, let's do this. And that's what it was. It was like $100,000 a year mentorship program, which was a massive leap for me at the time.
Right.
And 2 weeks later, our youngest son was born, and he was 16 weeks early. So he was about 1 pound and 2 ounces when he was born. And
Oh, wow.
luckily he survived. And I spent 16 weeks going back and forth to the NICU, and still, flipping my business on its head and trusting these people that were guiding me to create a new path. And that was a very challenging time. There's no doubt. But
Mm.
every time I hear, and I'm talking with people that have those hesitations and those fears around, like, well, I need to know what the outcome is going to be of this thing before I can even start, I can look back on that time and go, I get it. I know it's
Mm.
scary. But if you know in your gut that what you're doing is actually, worse than what's unknown on the other side of taking the leap, man, I can relate to that. And I also know what it takes to stay out of your head so that you don't convince yourself that you can't change your life completely. And I guess I would say too that over time, the one thing that I've got better at is that it doesn't need to be a complete burn down. Like, I don't want this life anymore. That needs to go away. I'm going this direction.
Mm.
It's more like pivots, small pivots, right? 2% this way, 2% that way. Oh, let's go this way a little bit. And it's kind of general, I'm speaking in generalities here, but when you think about being your own boss and having your own business and creating your own path, it's very disruptive, especially once you have a family, to just go a completely different direction. Like, it's risky, and most people won't even do it. There could be huge rewards on the other side, but it makes a lot more sense to just make small adjusted moves as you go.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. I hear you saying it's not a straight, like, you may get into business thinking it's a straight line that you do all this work and you're going to hit this objective, but what I hear you saying is there's going to be some flow there and some you got to be agile. You got to be able to move as things go, depending on what personal life is, what's happening in the personal life, and also in the market or industry that you're in too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what gifts or talents or abilities do you think that you have kept along the way that you learned from back in the hockey days leading up to now, that are really, you've been able to now realize you're gonna, like, these are actually part of you that you want to keep embracing and utilizing with what you're doing today?
Well, going back to those days, I think the first thing that comes to mind is just leadership and how to lead others. And, like, you and I know this from being a part of our extremely conscious circle too.
Yeah.
We say what we're going to do and we do what we're going to say. And that accountability is leadership. It leads everybody around you. And it might not be, uh, where you're intentionally or forcefully trying to create change around you, but just by default of you changing, me changing, things around us change. So those skills were definitely honed early. I was captain of my team in junior hockey, and kind of, again, thrown into something like that where I didn't know what to do, but I had a good coach at the time that was able to help me understand how to lead others by example, not
Right.
just not just with words and telling people what to do, but instead like, hey, you want people to come early and stay late, you better be willing to do it.
Mm.
And that still resonates for me now, because even as I continue to evolve what I do on a daily basis and who I can best serve, I'm being asked to show up and do it. I got to do the same thing that I'm asking others to do. I'm never above any of this stuff, creating contents and adapting the way that my offer is put together so that I can best serve people. And the world's changing too, right? Like you got to adapt with technology as well. This interview is a great example of that. We 5, 6 years ago, we couldn't take this and have it become content that could draw people into our worlds and have them go, that really resonated. I'm going to go check that out. Like, what a beautiful thing, right? But
Yeah.
if I put my head in the sand and didn't recognize what was happening right now, I wouldn't see those opportunities. So, yeah, so the leadership side of things, I think just being through just this whole crazy time of the last 15 years and the evolution, like we forget how quickly technology has come into our lives, and specifically social media, right?
Yeah.
I didn't have a Facebook account until 2009. That's only 14 years ago.
Yeah. Right.
So, and it's only going to get faster. That's the thing. So
It is. Yeah.
we get to evolve, right? The cliche is thick, evolve or die, but it's true, right? If you don't evolve with what's happening right now, you're going to be left behind. Other people will just be able to move faster than you. And that's really the name of the game nowadays, right? Is evolve.
You keep evolving. Yeah. And how do you bring that leadership as you mentioned, having two boys? How do you bring that to being a father?
Well, I think about that all the time, that
Yeah.
they're looking at how I show up more so than what I say to them. And as a parent too, like you get constant reminders of how much your kids
Yeah.
don't listen to you.
Yes. Definitely.
But at the same time, though, I mentioned this on a call that we did the other day. I think it was on the truth call that we did, but I talked about, I have a saying that I say to the kids, which is the Spider-Man saying, right? With great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
And I only have to say half of it now, and they always finish the second part. And it always lands for them. And it's because in those moments where, and it can be as simple as, hey, we said that we were going to sweep the floor before we go to bed, before we put that sticker on our chore board, before we get that date day with dad, which is what the, hockey game was, is we try and bring it back to the simple little things every day. You say you're going to do this, go follow through and do it. And
Yeah.
I try to lead by example as best I can. And I'm human and I'm not perfect, but it's always in the back of my mind on how am I showing them the example as opposed to telling them.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what you said there about not being perfect, how does that show up for you? Because I think that's also something that shows up for men and for dads is believing that we have to do it right the first time.
Yeah, it's a default for most men that I'm associated with anyway, that
Yeah.
till I can do it perfectly, I won't even start.
Right.
Kind of goes from renos to exercise to cooking to running your business to relationships and everything. But yeah, it doesn't serve, like even like just speaking about relationships, for example, I can look at this and say, well, unless I can have the most incredible relationship in the world, I'm not going to try the little tiny things. I'm not going to put the sticky note on my wife's computer in the morning and say, I appreciate you, or, whatever it might be, clean the sheets before she gets home, like make sure everything's changed.
Yeah.
It's the little details and doing them consistently over time that really does matter, which means you can't focus on the end result and what the desired outcome is. It has to be about the journey along the way and enjoying it.
Yeah, and it speaks to what you said earlier about those little pivot points, right? Or I can't remember how you worded it, but just those like making those small steps to get to
Yeah.
the bigger goal, right?
And that's the awakening that I had, honestly, 3 years
Yeah.
ago when the burnout hits.
Yeah.
What I was searching for was all the answers, like the existential answers of the world, right? Like, what the hell happens when you die? What's going on in the world? The world's gone crazy, But then I just realized it was like, wait a second, every single moment I have an opportunity to either choose to be fearful or loving. And not just with others, but with myself. When I go
Mm.
down that path of negative self-talk of like, oh my God, nothing's working right now, I can catch myself. And it required me to slow down. Like, who said it the other day? Oh, I was watching an interview with Kerwin Ray, who passed away recently actually, and Peter
Yeah.
Crone, and they were talking about his childhood experience of his parents splitting up and how he was really focused on his relationship right at that time, right? And Peter basically reflected back to him that he had this story that his parents splitting up was a mistake, that it shouldn't have happened, that it was bad, and that he was going to do it right.
Mm.
And then he told him, he says, "Do you realize you've spent 40 years with that thought in your head that that was bad and I'm going to do it right. And if it doesn't go this way, then now I'm bad."
Yeah.
40 years, like that's 40 years of programming. And I can say the same of myself too. I've had almost 2 decades now of entrepreneurship and all kinds of mistakes. And it's very easy to focus on those and let them creep back in every time you think, oh man, here we go again. It's not working. I should just stop this. But catching myself just in those micro moments and knowing that that's not going away. That's the ego. You can't kill it. I've tried, man. Tried.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just doesn't work.
It doesn't work. Yeah, I hear that. Yeah.
Just got to build a relationship with it. And then honestly, this is where it's been so powerful to have relationships with guys like you too, is knowing that you can turn to a space even too and say out loud some of the things that you got going on in your head where you feel like you're going nuts. And it's like, man, I can't figure this thing out, and have other people relate to you. Maybe even be able to provide some support or a little bit of advice, whatever it is, but just simply hold space. And the same is true for your business, right? Most people are in their heads. I'm in my head most
Yeah.
days.
Yeah.
And I have to catch myself and go, wait a second. What's the priority right now? What am I actually trying to do? What direction am I going? Do I need to stop doing that, or should I just keep going on that thing? Or should I just shut it down and then make a decision? Whatever it is, it's like, just move on it.
Definitely. Yeah. And I find it so interesting how, I know that the men that I've worked with and can relate to you, like it seems to be this pivotal moment that seems to happen where then more of an awakening is that they're more open to being, looking at things existentially, or like looking at more spiritual things, or like looking at the world differently. I'm waiting for this big moment to happen um,
Mhm.
before I'm open to just start, being myself, which is really interesting. These blocks are there until that happens.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, then it can send people down some pretty dark paths, like
Yeah.
depression and anxiety and stress and
Yeah.
all of these things. That's the beautiful part about the content that's been put out over the last number of years, is that the spiritual world to me was very woo-woo like 3 years ago. I was like, oh, okay, sounds good.
Mm.
Right now, like I'm all into it. I'm just like,
Yeah.
man, you can't ignore this stuff. But at the same time, though, too, the intellectual side of like the science of how our thoughts impact our physical health, and
Yeah.
what Dr. Joe Dispenza is doing and stuff. Like, man, if you just read a few books and watch a few videos, you recognize that that state that you're in right now is a chosen state. It's not because of anything that anybody's doing to you. But at the same time, it's challenging, right? It's why
Mhm.
guys like you exist, to be able to support people through that. Because if your current reality has all kinds of indicators that say, see, this is why I'm depressed, right? My job sucks, my relationship sucks,
Yeah.
kids don't want to talk to me, I don't make enough money, what all the things that could, make a person ultimately feel really horrible. You recognize that, like, it's the story that you're attaching to all those things that is actually holding you back from changing the story. So having
Yeah.
that awareness is just the starting point, but it's a place where most people just don't even want to look, because they think like, that's not real. How can that possibly be real? Can you not, you don't understand. This is my
Yeah.
life. Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Been there. So have you, right? That's
Definitely.
why I say that we can support people in this way.
Oh yeah. Like, one thing I absolutely appreciate is that like mental health and mental wellness for men is actually talked about today. Back in the 90s when I was first kind of looking at getting help, I kept it a secret. Like I saw a psychologist in secret for for a while, and then It took me a long time to actually tell people that I was getting help. And so I love that men can actually talk about this more. There's more support, but there still is that fear of, actually deciding to take the step and say, hey, I'm actually feeling really down right now. I need help, right? So it's great that a story like yours can help show other men and others that hey, you can come out of this. It's possible, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think back to those times too. I think the first time I went to a counselor was like early 2000s, and it was the same thing back then too. Social media didn't exist. I couldn't
Yeah,
really connect with people outside of my immediate
yeah,
social circle. And I made sure that I found a counselor that had a backdoor entrance. So I didn't park on the streets and walk in the front door.
yeah.
It's really interesting to think about that.
Oh, yeah,
And nowadays, there's so many communities. That's the thing too. It's
yeah,
not just one. There's something for everybody, like there's men's groups out there that are very much leaning towards the masculine, right? They're all
yeah,
about, you know, be the man,
yeah,
and which is cool. Like there's nothing
yeah,
wrong with that. And then there's also on the complete opposite side of that, right? It's very spiritual and very feminine and
yeah,
very much about tapping into that side. And then there's things that are kind of in the middle. And I think that's where we've really positioned extremely conscious too, because that's who we are, right? It's like,
yeah,
I'm still a guy's guy, but at the same time, like I want to lean in and believe in something that I can't physically see because it's hard to ignore once you go down this path and realize that like we're just these little blips in the universe just floating around. But we also live in this world too, right? We're all
yeah,
protectors, we're also providers. We have to be the man sometimes, right? We have to
yeah.
fill that role.
That balance there, right? The masculine and feminine energies, and yeah, and you talked earlier about choosing fear over love. I love because Marianne Williamson is an author that I listened to for years, and she talks about, it's a choice. Do you want to continue to be in fear and keep blaming, keep judging, keep being stuck, or do you want to actually look at things from a different perspective? That it's unconditional. It's just appreciating yourself
Yeah.
for who you are and loving yourself no matter where you're at, which I think for men at times can be it's that in itself is a bit of a challenge. Is like, okay, you want me to love myself? What are you talking about here, right? But to be able to step into that and realize that actually helps heal you in so many ways.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and it's the gateway to creating everything you want in
yeah,
life
yeah,
because this is the beautiful part about the day and age that we live in right now. Take this podcast as an example. Nobody has to give you permission to do this. All you got to do is show up and do it.
yeah,
And then when you hit the point where you're like, well, I don't know how to do the next part. Like, what do I do with it? How do I put it out in the world? How do I chop it
yeah,
up? How do I get people to care? How do I get them to move into my spaces so that I can
yeah,
support them at a greater level?
yeah,
Well, then you just ask for help
yeah.
and the help will show up. It's
Mhm.
it's incredible, really. Like people want to
Yeah.
vilify this whole social media world and these tools that we have available to communicate, but when used properly, they can completely change your life. You just have to be careful because they can also consume it in a very negative, dark
Ex
way too.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
how are you helping people in what you do these days?
Well, there's a few different ways. So speaking of evolution and
Yeah.
constantly redefining myself, during that 3-year period here, I kind of wanted to kill my old self. I was
Mm,
like, I don't want to be that person anymore. And it's only been in the last 6 months or so where I started to recognize some of the things you were even saying is like, wait a second, what are some of the skills and the gifts that I've received as a result of all this experience that I've created? And that's why I mentioned at the start that I work with visionary coaches, consultants, startup founders, because I have worked with people like that in the past. Like, just give you one quick example. I got a buddy from back home in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, who had an idea to build an iPhone case out of flax straw and biopolymers. So it became a biodegradable iPhone case at a time when landfills were filling up with plastic products. And I believed in them at that time. I was like, this sounds cool, man. Let me help
yeah.
go get funding. Let me help you build your first website, your explainer video. positioning, get you involved and introduced to the right people. And fast forward 15 years later, it's now $100 million company with 300 employees. And they've developed another product
Yeah.
called Lomi, which is like a countertop composter for your banana peels and stuff, right? Like black dirt, odorless within like
Yeah.
5 hours.
Look at that.
World changing stuff, right? And I had to remind myself, I was like, oh yeah, I did that. And I did it because I've thrown myself into so many things that require you to have such an agile view as to like, how do you create a business that doesn't just make money, but actually creates a change in the world, yourself and the other people that you work with, and can be very lucrative and abundant. So that's what I do now. I work with people like that want to build an aligned vision for their future and have a business that aligns with that supports that growth, knowing that in this 3D physical world, we still need money to exist too. So it's about
Yeah.
cash flow. It's about moving and being agile and changing, adapting fast so that you can find what fits. What are people actually looking for? How do they want to receive the support that I can actually give? So that's what I'm doing right now.
Amazing. It sounds like you're really supporting people to bring their passion to life and to make it sustainable and make it something that they can do every day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
taking shape in, an intensive that I'm going to roll out here soon, and
Yeah.
an accelerator, which is more of a one-on-one engagement where I've got a whole team of people behind me too that
Yeah.
do design and development and content and copywriting and all that kind of stuff. Same stuff that I've done with my clients for years. And
Yeah.
I was the one in my own way, right? People were
Yeah.
actually waiting for me to show up and deliver this. And now it feels awesome to be stepping back into that and delivering that.
That's so great, Trevor. How can people find you? What's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, my personal website is just trevorturnbull.com. And
Easy?
yeah, that links
Yeah.
up all my socials, I believe. I think they're all on the bottom of that page. But yeah, it really speaks to who I am and what I'm up to and who I believe I can best support. And there's some free resources on there as well, too, because I want people to be able to be empowered to move and change their lives and grow their business, but do it in an aligned way that isn't just about the money. It's about the money, but also, everything else that they can create in their life, the freedom
Amazing.
for.
That's great. Any last words you want to share with our listeners about bringing their gifts to the world? Any advice, any guidance in addition to what you've said?
Get yourself around people that have big dreams and be brave enough to say out loud what you don't understand, but also what you do have real world experience in, because whatever you've been through is actually a gift, right? This is the focal point of this podcast for you. But I'm a huge believer in that. I've seen it. I have been witness to it in my own personal life. I've felt the shame around like, well, I can't really talk about that experience. It's like, yeah, you can, because somebody needs to hear it and know that they're not alone. And that will help elevate everybody around you. And it will actually create everything that you desire to, just like that Zig Ziglar quote, right? It's like help others get what they want and you will get everything that you want.
Oh, sure. It's a great message. Thank you so much, Trevor, for being on today. Really
My pleasure,
appreciate
man.
hearing your story and your wise words of wisdom there. It's fantastic.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you very much.
Thanks. This episode is brought to you by the Amazon best-selling book, Engage, Connect, Grow. 52 lessons to guide individuals, corporate teams to the heart of what truly matters to them. Visit Amazon today and obtain your copy of Engage, Connect, Grow.